Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Sunday, June 21st, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today will reach a high of 82.6 degrees with a low of 60.1 degrees. It is a wonderful day to honor and celebrate the father figures in our lives, so a very happy Father's Day to all of you. Coming up on the program, we are taking a closer look at the diplomatic discussions occurring between American and Iranian negotiators in Switzerland. We will also dive into the factors that caused the state of California to take so much time when tabulating election results. In addition to these topics, we have a variety of other important headlines to cover throughout the episode. All of this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning, everyone. We're following a major diplomatic push as U.S. and Iranian negotiators gather in Switzerland for high-stakes talks. Ethan, what's happening today?
Good morning, Grace. As of today, June 21st, U.S. and Iranian negotiators have converged on a Swiss venue for technical-level talks that begin Sunday. According to the Associated Press, carried by Coco 5 News and ABC 7 Chicago, plus PBS NewsHour, these discussions aim to finalize key details of an interim agreement. The whole point is to halt a widening war in the region. It's a critical moment, and the world is watching closely.
So who's actually sitting at the table for these negotiations?
There's a heavy diplomatic presence, Grace. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance arrived in Switzerland on Saturday evening, joining top negotiators Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. On the Iranian side, the delegation is led by Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf. He's joined by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, along with officials from the central bank and the oil sector. That tells you money and energy are central to these talks.
I understand other countries are helping broker this. Who's mediating?
That's right. Pakistan is serving as a key mediator in this effort. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir both departed for Switzerland late Saturday. Qatari mediators are also participating in the process, which adds another regional voice to the room. Interestingly, the talks were originally slated to begin Friday, but Iranian officials canceled those plans due to escalating hostilities in Lebanon.
Let's talk about the deal itself. What's actually in this interim agreement?
The interim deal was signed by U.S. President Donald Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. It provides a 60-day window, which can be extended, to reach a comprehensive nuclear agreement. Under its terms, the U.S. has lifted its blockade of Iranian ports, allowing Tehran to sell its oil freely. The agreement also calls for unfreezing billions of dollars in Iranian assets. And maritime travel in the Strait of Hormuz is meant to be toll-free for that 60-day period.
Toll-free for now. But I hear President Trump has issued a warning about that?
He has, Grace. President Trump has threatened to impose American tolls in the waterway if a final deal isn't reached within the time frame. He described that potential revenue in striking terms. Trump said, quote, "services rendered as the guardian angel to the countries of the Middle East," end quote. So essentially, he's framing those future tolls as payment for U.S. protection in the region. It's an unusual way to characterize maritime traffic.
And yet the Strait of Hormuz seems to be the biggest sticking point. What's the dispute there?
It really is the flashpoint. Iran's Joint Military Command announced the closure of the strait, citing what it called a, quote, clear breach of commitments, end quote, by the U.S. in failing to end the war. They specifically referenced Israeli attacks in Lebanon. A Hezbollah official told the Associated Press that Iran informed the group it would not reopen the strait until Israel publicly commits to a comprehensive ceasefire and stops military operations in Lebanon. So the strait has become leverage tied directly to the fighting.
How is the United States responding to that closure claim?
The U.S. is disputing it vigorously, Grace. Captain Tim Hawkins of U.S. Central Command asserted that Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz and that traffic continues to flow. U.S. military data indicated that 55 merchant ships transited the strait on Saturday, transporting over 17 million barrels of oil. According to a BBC report, Vice President J.D. Vance and U.S. Central Command have both maintained that the waterway remains open. So you've got two completely different stories about whether this strait is actually closed.
That's a remarkable gap. Now, all of this is unfolding while there's serious fighting in Lebanon. Bring us up to speed.
It's a grim backdrop to these talks. There's severe violence between Israel and the Iranian-backed Hezbollah. This conflict began shortly after U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran on February 28th, so it's been building for months. Lebanon's health ministry now reports the death toll in the Israel-Hezbollah war has surpassed 4,000. That number underscores just how urgent these negotiations have become.
What about the violence over just the past day? What are we hearing?
Saturday alone was devastating. The Lebanese National News Agency reported that Israeli strikes killed at least 16 people, including 2 children. There were casualties in the city of Nabatea and villages such as Barish, Arab Salim, Kanarit, Solmor, and Shihor. Drone strikes also hit Douer and Kfar Ruman, killing a Lebanese soldier and a civilian. So the human toll keeps climbing even as diplomats meet.
And Hezbollah is firing back, I take it.
Yes, an Israeli military official stated that Hezbollah fired over 50 projectiles at Israeli forces overnight. That same official said 5 Israeli soldiers were killed in southern Lebanon over the last 48 hours. So this is very much a two-way conflict with mounting casualties on both sides. It's exactly the kind of escalation these Swiss talks are trying to interrupt.
Here's what I'm wondering, Ethan. Israel and Hezbollah aren't even part of the U.S.-Iran deal, right?
That's a key point, Grace. Neither Israel nor Hezbollah are signatories to the U.S.-Iran deal. But U.S. and Qatari negotiators have worked with Iran to try to tamp down these hostilities because the fighting threatens everything else. An Israeli military official noted the military has received, quote, updated directives from the political echelon to cease fire, end quote. Still, Israel maintains the right to respond to attacks, so it's a fragile and conditional pause.
So where do the two sides actually stand on stopping the fighting?
They remain far apart. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to keep forces in southern Lebanon until all threats are eliminated. On the other side, Hezbollah refuses to halt its attacks until Israel commits to a full withdrawal. So each side is waiting on the other to move first. That deadlock is precisely what's complicating the broader diplomacy in Switzerland.
Is there any path forward on the Lebanon front specifically?
There is one to watch, Grace. A new round of U.S.-backed talks between Israel and the Lebanese government is expected in Washington next week. That's a separate track from the Swiss negotiations, but the two are deeply connected, because progress in Lebanon could ease tensions over the Strait of Hormuz. If the fighting cools, Iran loses its main justification for keeping the strait closed. So next week could prove just as consequential as this Sunday's session.
Big picture then. What should we all be watching for in the days ahead?
I'd keep an eye on 3 things, Grace. First, whether Sunday's technical talks actually nail down the details of that interim agreement during the 60-day window. Second, whether the Strait of Hormuz dispute gets resolved, because the U.S. and Iran can't even agree on whether it's open. And third, whether the violence in Lebanon eases enough to give diplomats room to work. Those threads are all tangled together, and any one of them could make or break this fragile process.
Ethan, thank you for walking us through all of it. We'll be checking back as those Swiss talks get underway.
Happy to, Grace. We'll have the latest as soon as it develops.
It's June 21st, 2026, and there's a real fight brewing in California over how long it takes to count votes. Speed versus access, and it's getting national attention. Our Chloe has been digging into this. Chloe, good morning.
Good morning, Grace. This story really took off after a recent primary, where it took a full week before enough ballots were counted to call the marquee governor's race. That kind of delay drew national scrutiny, and it's forced California Democrats to defend a system that prioritizes voter access over a fast result. According to Cal Matters, party leaders say they simply won't, quote, clamp down, end quote, on late voters just to speed things up.
A full week to call a governor's race. Who's leading the criticism here?
A few high-profile voices, actually. Nate Silver, writing on social media, called California an outlier in its slow vote counting, compared to any other U.S. state or nearly any other industrialized democracy. The New York Times editorial board went further, saying these delays are, quote, damaging faith in government, end quote. And here's the part that stings for Democrats. The Times argued the slow process primes voters to believe the claims of election skeptics, including President Donald Trump and his allies.
That's a heavy charge. Is California's own governor weighing in?
He is, and that's what makes this so striking. Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, has urged counties to produce results faster. He argues that delays erode trust in the electoral outcome. Newsom said the slow pace creates, quote, fertile ground for misinformation, end quote. So you've got a Democratic governor essentially siding with the critics on the need for speed, even as fellow Democrats push back.
So how are those fellow Democrats responding to Newsom?
They're holding their ground, Grace. Assemblymember Gail Pellerin has argued that getting results on election night would mean a return to in-person voting or much earlier deadlines for mail-in returns. And several other leaders are flatly refusing to go there. Assemblymember Mark Berman, Senator Tom Umberg, and Senator Scott Wiener all say they won't support restricting access for the sake of speed. Wiener put it simply, saying that disenfranchising people is not the, quote, right answer, end quote.
It sounds like there's a real philosophical divide. Where does the state's top elections official land?
California's Secretary of State Shirley Weber is the most dismissive of all. She's characterized the concerns over slow returns as a, quote, Trump talking point, end quote. And she told Cal Matters that accuracy is far more important than speed. So from her chair, the urgency itself is suspect. That tells you how politically charged even the conversation about counting has become.
Let's get into the why. What's actually making the count so slow?
It really comes down to one big structural change. California moved to a universal vote-by-mail system during the pandemic, and the scale of that shift is stark. 10 years ago, fewer than 60% of general election voters used mail-in ballots, but in last year's statewide special election, nearly 90% did. Mail ballots just take more time to handle, and that's the heart of the bottleneck.
Almost 90% by mail. What specifically slows down a mail ballot?
A few things stack up, according to Cal Matters. First, there's the grace period. California allows 7 days for late-arriving ballots, and the New York Times specifically criticized that window. Then there's the basic processing demand. Eric McGee of the Public Policy Institute of California noted that mail-in ballots require more time, energy, and money to process than in-person votes. So every step that's instant at a polling place becomes a much longer chain of work by mail.
Walk me through what that work actually looks like on the ground.
There's a great example out of Yolo County. The registrar there, Jesse Salinas, reported that more than half of the primary ballots arrived on Election Day itself. And here's the kicker. He estimated the scanners only detect an exact match for about 30% of ballots. The remaining 70% have to be hand-checked by humans for registration, duplicate voting, and authentic signatures. So you're talking about people manually reviewing the vast majority of ballots.
70% by hand. That sounds like a staffing nightmare.
It is, and it's also a space problem. Salinas said his office is physically overwhelmed by boxes of ballots on Election Day. He told Cal Matters they'd basically need an entirely new building to house more workers or more machines. So it's not just about hiring people. There's nowhere to put them. That's the kind of practical limit that doesn't show up in a tweet about slow counting.
Money has to be part of this. Is the state helping pay for it?
That's a central point of contention, actually. McGee noted that, unlike other states, California does not provide consistent ongoing funds to counties for elections. And the comparisons are pretty telling. Colorado pays 45% of the cost for statewide decisions. Hawaii splits costs with counties for federal or statewide elections. And Arizona reimburses counties $1.25 per active registered voter for presidential primaries.
So other states chip in, but California mostly doesn't?
Right, at least not on an ongoing basis. The state has stepped in for specific events. It covered the costs for Governor Newsom's 2021 recall and for the 2025 statewide special election on redistricting. Salinas noted that funding actually allowed for some equipment upgrades. But that's one-time money for big-ticket elections, not the steady support counties say they need to staff up year after year.
And without that steady support, how are counties holding up financially?
Not well, frankly. Salinas reported being told to cut $1.1 million from his budget. That's driven by structural deficits and the loss of state and federal Medi-Cal dollars. So at the very moment officials are being told to count faster, some are being asked to do it with less. That squeeze is a big reason this debate feels so unresolved.
Does spending local money actually fix the speed problem?
It helps, but it doesn't erase the challenge, because the sheer volume is so high. Look at Orange County. They made a $4 million investment in new processing equipment, which is significant. And yet the county registrar, Bob Page, and his staff still required over a week to process more than 807,000 ballots. Staff were working extended hours and weekends to get it done. So even with serious investment, the numbers just overwhelm the timeline.
800,000 ballots in one county. That really puts the week-long count in perspective.
It does, and it shows why this isn't a simple fix. The critics, including Newsom, aren't wrong that slow results can feed distrust and misinformation. But the registrars are saying the math is brutal. When nearly 90% vote by mail, more than half arrive on election day, and 70% need a human review, speed and access are genuinely in tension. Both sides, in a way, are describing the same reality from different angles.
So where does this debate go from here?
That's the open question, Grace. As of today, June 21st, Democratic leaders have drawn a clear line. They're not willing to trade away voter access for a faster headline on election night. The pressure isn't going away, especially with national figures like Nate Silver and the New York Times watching closely. But the practical fixes, like more funding, more space, more staff, all cost money the counties say they don't have. So expect this fight over speed versus access to keep simmering through the next election cycle.
It sounds like the answer may ultimately come down to dollars, more than ideology.
In many ways, yes. The philosophical debate gets the headlines, but McGee's point about ongoing funding is really the crux. Other states share the cost, and they tend to count faster. California has leaned on counties to absorb a system that got far more complex almost overnight. Until that funding gap closes, officials like Salinas and Page are going to keep telling us the same thing. They can be fast or they can be thorough on a shoestring, but it's very hard to be both.
That's a clear way to frame it. Chloe, thanks so much for breaking it all down for us this morning.
My pleasure, Grace. It's a story worth watching.
Here are some other headlines. Turning our attention to Southeast Asia, where the Cambodian government is finally calling the bluff on a massive scam industry. In a sweeping crackdown, over 200,000 workers have been released from fortified compounds, effectively breaking the spell of these digital dungeons. Many of these individuals were trafficked and forced to work for pennies, proving that these job offers were far from a windfall. It seems the lure of TikTok ads, which promised positions that were simply too good to be true, was nothing more than a fishing expedition for human lives, including the tragic case of one man from Uganda. While the workers are out, the situation is still a bit of a wash, as tens of thousands remain stranded on the streets of Phnom Penh with nowhere to go. The scale of the fraud is truly staggering. The industry managed to fleece Americans of at least $20 billion in 2025, leaving a financial hole that is nearly impossible to plug. Moving over to South America, things are hitting a standstill in Bolivia. The president has declared a state of emergency as road blockades continue to choke off essential supplies. It is a real bottleneck for the nation, leaving the government struggling to find a way around the gridlock. In the world of high finance, analysts are worried that the Federal Reserve might be playing a dangerous game. Some suggest that Warsh's gamble on a quieter approach could lead to volatile markets and higher interest rates, potentially leaving investors feeling a bit shaken as the economic forecast turns cloudy. Meanwhile, in the Constitution state, Connecticut is making a massive leap into the future. The state is launching a $121 million quantum push, betting big that these subatomic breakthroughs will put them on the cutting edge of technology. They are certainly jumping the quantum gap to stay ahead of the curve. Finally, we have some diplomatic friction crossing the Atlantic. Donald Trump has deepened a dust-up with Italy's Prime Minister Meloni. The tension is boiling over after Meloni fired back, labeling his latest comments as senseless, unprovoked attacks. It seems the special relationship between these two is currently in a state of total meltdown, and neither side seems ready to simmer down. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.8, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.